as the break had ended, um, William and Daenerys returned past the first library with the Targaryen flag back into the Hall of Genealogical Records library. And as they sit down, then she begins to introduce him to the next line for the House of the Targaryen to the Iron Throne of Swords for the realm of the kingdom. You're going to learn about now the next one who was in rule. As you remember, you had stated that Queen Rhaenyra you felt was in the right because her father, Viserys I, had named her heir to the throne. And as opposed to Aegon II, whose mother and second wife to Viserys I Targaryen, Alicent, was the mother to Aegon II Targaryen. Do you remember? Yes, Daenerys, I remember. Well, his reign was not exactly a happy one, especially after seeing what had happened to his mother by her half-brother Aegon II Targaryen, having had his dragon Sunfyre, though injured, devour his mother before his eyes after having torched her with dragon fire. Yes, I can imagine that would be the most horrifying experience and sight for any child to have witnessed. And to try to rule a kingdom with that always on the back of your mind, no child should ever have to witness this. Yes, you are right. I agree with this. He had his happy moments now and then. His best was when he was finally reunited with his brother, Viserys II, who was fortunate enough not to have witnessed this. In any case, this is where you're going to learn about his reign and Viserys II's reign. Eventually, this will lead to another type of rebellion, but not as large as the civil war known as Dance of the Dragons. Alright, well, I'm ready to begin to learn about the next reign then from Queen Rhaenyra's time and King Aegon II's time since the civil war of the Dance of the Dragons. So with that then, he begins to study on the scrolls of the next reigning kings. Okay, we're not going to spend a whole lot of time on this one because we've pretty much touched it on various areas during the Dance of the Dragons, which was the civil war between Queen Rhaenyra Targaryen, who is rightful heir to the Iron Throne of Swords for the realm of the kingdoms, and the King Aegon II of King's Landing, who is of the House of Targaryen, but because it was a civil war between him and his half sister, Queen Rhaenyra. Rhaenyra Targaryen, as you remember, was the first of two daughters from Prince Daemon and Lady Laena Valerian, and she had a younger sister named Baelin Targaryen. At the time, during the Dance of Dragons, Queen Rhaenyra had gotten approval for a suggested marriage, hoping that it would change the mood of Prince Daemon, for Rhaena Targaryen, daughter of Daemon, to marry Jacaerys Valerian. However, as we remember, that during the Dance of the Dragons, Jacaerys somehow got too close to the water with his dragon, and when the dragon hit the water, he jumped off, but several bolts had killed him. So, in which case then, no children were ever born of this marriage. She did, however, get another egg and had slept with it for quite some time, and a final dragon was born, mourning, but it didn't live long. She only got to ride it a few times, and it shortly thereafter died, and pretty much looked like it was going to be the extinction of all dragons, because again, Daenerys Stormborn of the House of Targaryen has not yet been born, and it wouldn't be until her reign that dragons would resurface again. Meanwhile, at the time when Aegon III, also known as Aegon the Younger, had succeeded Aegon II Targaryen after his being poisoned, and thus ending the civil war between the Greens and the Blacks, she had married a knight, Corwin Corbray of the House Corbray. But again, while he was in servitude to King Aegon III, someone had shot some bolts during some kind of excursion or confrontation, and he died. And again, no children are born of this marriage between Corwin Corbray and Rhaenyra Targaryen. Well, at the time she's about to meet the next person in her life, she introduces someone to Aegon III, because he too, as part of the peace agreement, had married the only surviving daughter of Aegon II. And she, like her mother, of course, committed suicide out of the Red Keep. So he only got to have her as a daughter or as a wife for a couple of years. Well, this would have been something interesting then, because this would have been like a double wedding. So she, Rhaenyra Targaryen, then marries a Daemon Hightower of the House Hightower. And this is where history gets a little shady. So this is why I'm paraphrasing, being the palace historian. Either it's because since she was of the House Targaryen and the children born of this marriage were not of royalty, and thus was considered not important to document them, or records were just simply lost, because nothing is more heard about the 6 children that Rhaenyra Targaryen and Daemon Hightower of the Hightower, a knight, having 6 children together is ever heard of again. So the genealogy, as you can see here, 6 children unknown, never documented or records were lost, is ever heard of again. Other than the fact that she had a sister, Baela, who is also the second daughter of Daemon Targaryen and Lena Valerian. She had a dragon known as, well, Baela had a dragon known as Moondancer. So Moondancer, of course, didn't live long, because Sunfyre, which was Aegon II's dragon, had being much stronger and bigger, though Moondancer was quite the agile and zip here and zip there, was a pretty fast dragon, was devoured by Sunfyre. So in any case, as we now look into Baela, Baela was also, as I said, the daughter of Lena Valerian and Prince Daemon Targaryen. And again, upon his rule, and with hopes to change his mood, during the civil war known as Dance of the Dragons, Queen Rhaenyra had suggested that Baela marry Lucerys Valerian, her second son, who is the brother to Jacaerys Valerian. But unfortunately, he got killed by this younger brother of Aegon II, and therefore Prince Daemon had sworn out a vengeance by hiring Blood and Cheese through a contact of his to even the score. So whether she married again or not is uncertain because history was very short on her. But she did have a sister, as we just covered, Rhaenyra Targaryen. Princess Baela Targaryen, of course, history is never much heard more of again, and her history was even shorter. So that's pretty much for this timeline as to where they came in. But now that Aegon III Targaryen is in the seat, which technically speaking would have been the victory for Queen Rhaenyra Targaryen, though she was not alive to see this take place, it now comes to where he now sits the Iron Throne of Swords for the realm of the kingdom. So we're going to go take a look to see what's going on in King's Landing. In King's Landing now, that Aegon III Targaryen has the Iron Throne of Swords for the realm of the kingdoms. He is one of two surviving sons of Queen Rhaenyra Targaryen, who is the rightful heir named by former King Viserys I Targaryen, her father, and Prince Daemon Targaryen, who was both husband and uncle to Queen Rhaenyra Targaryen. His brother, the youngest brother anyway, of the three children that Queen Rhaenyra had with Prince Daemon Targaryen, is Viserys II Targaryen. And as we already know, Queen Rhaenyra Targaryen, unfortunately, due to stress and everything caused by Aegon II Targaryen during the civil war known as Dance of the Dragons, had a stillborn Visenya. At the time, Aegon II had lost contact with his brother Viserys II Targaryen. Little was known if he was even still alive. Somehow, during the Civil War, they had gotten separated. As we also, I'm going to touch very briefly on this, because again, we have already touched on this before. Aegon II, before he got poisoned, rather than take the black, had made a peace arrangement after murdering, that is, well, in his opinion, judging Queen Rhaenyra as a traitor, that the peace agreement would be that Aegon II would marry Princess and sole surviving heir, Princess Rhaenyra. Now, the unusual thing about this is that she only lived for a couple of years. He did have a dragon known as Dragon Stormcloud, but it too was killed at one point in time during the Dance of the Dragons. Like the mother, King Aegon II's wife and sister, Helaena Targaryen, Princess Rhaenyra Targaryen, either by stress or because of everything that had happened with the loss of both her older brother and younger brother during the Dance of the Dragons Civil War, or some other reason, after a couple of years, like her mother, took a nosedive out of the Red Keep and survived only 30 minutes of agonizing pain before dying. So thus ended the faction, the Greens, once and for all, of King Aegon II, after he had 2 years prior of the prearranged peace settlement marriage was poisoned by those unknown, yet 20 that were supposed to be in charge of his safety had been found, tried, and convicted by a member of the House of Starks. So in the end, the House of Blacks had, in some way, symbolically, conquered all. While at the Red Keep, again, remember, Queen Rhaenyra Targaryen, daughter of Prince uh, Daemon Targaryen and Lena Valerian, before she had passed away from a stillborn birth, which is why the uncle married his niece, Queen Rhaenyra Targaryen. She had introduced a young lady by the name of Daenerys Valerian, who was consort to Aegon III after the death of the last final daughter heir to Aegon II. And again, of course, it became a double wedding. Eventually, as I said, this third husband to Rhaenyra Targaryen, though it's said they had 6 children together, nothing more is ever heard of her again, because either records were lost or the offspring were not considered important enough to keep in the House of Targaryen records. Nevertheless, Aegon the Younger Targaryen eventually started maturing with age, and no longer would he be known as Aegon the Younger, but he would be known as Aegon III Targaryen, to sit the Iron Throne of Swords for the realm of the kingdom. Aegon III Targaryen. Aegon III Targaryen, also known as Aegon the Younger, and later Aegon the Dragonbane, was the 7th king of the Targaryen line to sit the Iron Throne. He succeeded his uncle, Aegon II Targaryen, at the conclusion of the Dance of the Dragons, which saw the victorious supporters of his late mother, Rhaenyra Targaryen, install him on the throne. When he was a child, his dragon was Stormcloud. Aegon kept the kingdom united following the divisions of the Civil War, with the aid of his brother, Prince Viserys, whom he named Hand of the King when he came of age. Appearance and character. Aegon had dark purple eyes and pale silvery hair. He was pale, lean, and never smiled because of the grief he carried from seeing his mother Rhaenyra devoured by Sunfyre, the dragon of his uncle, Aegon the Elder. Aegon the Younger wore a short beard but no mustache. His crown was a slender gold band. After the Dance of the Dragons, Aegon became brooding, cold, and melancholy. He always dressed in black. In the biography of his youth, he was born in the late days of 120 AC. Aegon was the firstborn son of his father, Prince Daemon Targaryen, and the fourth-born son of his mother, Prince Rhaenyra Targaryen. As per Targaryen tradition, a dragon's egg was placed in his cradle, and Stormcloud eventually hatched from this egg. Aegon was named after Aegon the Conqueror. Queen Alicent Hightower, the second wife of his grandfather, King Viserys I Targaryen, took offense to Aegon's name, since she had a son named Aegon herself, and felt that Rhaenyra and Daemon were trying to use the name as a slight against her. Due to the fact that the royal family now contained 2 young Targaryens named Aegon, Alicent's son came to be known as Aegon the Elder, whereas Rhaenyra's son was called Aegon the Younger. Aegon the Younger had 3 older half-brothers, Prince Jacaerys, Lucerys, and Joffrey Valerian, from his mother's first marriage to Sir Lenore Valerian, and 2 older half-sisters, Princess Baela and Rhaenyra Targaryen, from his mother's second marriage to Prince Daemon. 2 years after Aegon's birth, Rhaenyra gave birth to another boy, Viserys, named after the boy's grandfather. Aegon lived with his mother, father, brothers, and half-sisters on Dragonstone, the ancestral seat of House Targaryen, and his mother's seat as the Princess of Dragonstone. When his grandfather died in early 129 AC, Aegon and his family were away from the capital as Rhaenyra was pregnant for the 6th time. This led to the birth of Aegon's sister, Visenya, but the girl was stillborn. The Dance of the Dragons. A war of succession began with the death of Aegon's grandfather, King Viserys I Targaryen. Though Aegon's mother, Rhaenyra Targaryen, had been named heir to the Iron Throne by Viserys, Aegon the Younger's half-uncle, Aegon the Elder, was crowned king, Aegon II in King's Landing. This resulted in the Dance of the Dragons. In 129 AC, at the behest of their half-brother Jacaerys Valerian, Aegon and his younger brother Viserys were sent to Essos, while their mother Rhaenyra secured the Iron Throne. During the journey, their ship, the Gay Abandon, was captured by ships of the Triarchy. Aegon escaped by flying on his dragon, Stormcloud, for the first time, but Viserys was captured by Shirako Lohar. Aegon clung to Stormcloud's neck to reach Dragonstone, where he shared the news of what had befallen the fleet. The experience of his first flight was so frightening that Aegon returned to Dragonstone pale, shaking, and having lost control of his bladder. Stormcloud shortly died from the wounds he had received during the flight, and Aegon never rode a dragon again. Upon learning what had happened, fearing for the life of their brother Viserys, Prince Jacaerys flew to the fleet on his dragon, Vermax, but both died in the Battle of the Gullet that ensued. When Queen Rhaenyra took the King's Landing in 130 AC, she named Aegon the Younger her cupbearer, after he had joined her from Dragonstone. Aegon hardly spoke a word during this time. After the storming of the Dragon Pit, he and Rhaenyra were forced to flee the capital. Rhaenyra, nearly mad with grief from losing her dragon Syrax, and all her children except Aegon, refused to be parted from him at any time, and he became a small pale shadow to his mother. Unaware of the fall of Dragonstone, mother and son returned to see the charred corpses of the Castellan, Sir Robert Quince, and some others who had been loyal to Rhaenyra's hanging from the gates. Aegon was the first to realize what it meant and cried, "Mother, flee!" But it was too late. They were brought into the courtyard, where Aegon II was waiting. Young Aegon watched in horror as his uncle's dragon, Sunfyre, devoured his mother. Aegon was forever mentally scarred, and this event cemented his later fierce hatred for and terror of dragons. After Rhaenyra's execution, Sir Alfred Broom advised King Aegon II to kill the young Aegon, but the king decided to keep his nephew captive in the dungeon of Dragonstone. The death of Rhaenyra did not end the war. Following the victory of Lord Kermit Tully and the lads over the greens of Lord Boros Baratheon at the Battle of the King's Road half a year later, Aegon II was murdered by his own men. Aegon the Younger inherited the throne as Aegon III in 131 AC. Reign. Since Aegon came to the Iron Throne aged 11, several regents and hands ruled in his name at the beginning of his reign. Numerous political schemes, plots, and assassinations happened in those 5 years as the regents fought one another for political power. Aegon's only companion in his first years was Daemon Palehair, a former pretender to the throne, and now Aegon's servant, friend, whipping boy, and eventual food taster. Aegon was married to his cousin, Princess Rhaenyra Targaryen, in 131 AC. As Rhaenyra was the only surviving child of the late Aegon II Targaryen, the match was a political one, so both bloodlines could be seen to hold the throne in the hope of uniting the Seven Kingdoms. And the factions who fought each other's side, since Rhaenyra was 8 years old at the time of the marriage, and Aegon was 11, it was not consummated. 2 years later, the marriage ended childless when Rhaenyra died, a suicide, or perhaps murder. Aegon later married Lady Daenerys Targaryen. She was only 6 years old when Aegon's half-sisters, Rhaena and Baela, presented her to him, the last of 1,000 maids, at the Great Ball of 133 AC. This ball had been declared by the hand Lord Unwin Peake after the regents stopped his efforts to betroth his own daughter to the king. However, Lord Peake did not give up his attempts and was greatly frustrated by Aegon's choice of Daenerys. His efforts to have the marriage put aside were opposed by both Aegon and the other regents and resulted in his resignation as Hand in 134 AC. Later, an attempted poisoning was made on Aegon and Daenerys, which resulted in the death of Aegon's friend and food taster, Daemon Palehair. Aegon had only one true joy during the years of his regency: the return of his younger brother, Prince Viserys in 134 AC or 135 AC. It was thought that Viserys had been killed at the Battle of Golan, and Aegon had never forgiven himself for abandoning his brother when he fled on Stormcloud. Viserys was eventually recovered from Lys by Admiral Alan Valerian, where he had been held in secret by merchant princes. The ransom was enormous, but Viserys' release was a joy regardless. For the rest of his days, he was the only person Aegon ever fully trusted. Viserys came to King's Landing with his new wife, Laura Rogaire, and several of her kin. The ambitious Rogaire family soon became embroiled in the conflicts of Aegon's regency. Although the Rogaires at the Red Keep were apparently guilty of some crimes, their rivals in King's Landing blamed them for many more. In 135 AC, Lord Thaddeus Rowan was tortured in an attempt to find evidence against the Rogaires. So Sir Marston Waters, the Hand of the King, sent men to capture Laura after arresting her brothers. Aegon and Viserys refused to surrender Laura, however, and the case against the Rogaires collapsed. After Aegon came of age in 136 AC, he dismissed the regents and his Hand of the King, and named Prince Viserys as his Hand. Viserys served as Hand during the remaining years of Aegon's reign and during the reigns of both Aegon's sons. The crown dealt with several pretenders claiming to be the Daring, who perished during the Second Battle of Tumbleton, but whose body had never been found or identified. As King Aegon III strove to give the realm peace and plenty, but his coldness kept him from courting his lords and people. Aegon is often blamed for the death of the last dragon, having had a great distaste for dragons after the tragic death of Stormcloud, and because he witnessed his mother being devoured by Sunfyre. Although the Maesters may have played a part in the death of the last dragons. Aegon III became known as Aegon the Dragonbane. At the urging of his brother, Prince Viserys, Aegon brought 9 mages from Essos to attempt to hatch a clutch of dragon eggs with magic. But this ended in failure. Aegon was regarded as a broken king who ruled over a broken reign. His brother Viserys did the majority of the ruling as his hand. Aegon was melancholy to the end of his days, found pleasure in almost nothing, and locked himself in his room to brood for days on end. He likewise came to dislike being touched, even by his beautiful wife and queen, Rhaenyra. Though their marriage was eventually fruitful, it was said Aegon took a long time to come to her bed, even after she flowered. His marriage to Daenerys gave him 2 sons, Daeron, born 143 AC, and Baelor, born 144 AC, and 3 daughters, Dana, born 145 AC, Rhaena, born 147 AC, and Olenna, born 150 AC. However, before we continue, there is also a mystery that has been discovered. The mystery is that between the birth of first daughter, Rhaenyra Targaryen, daughter of Aegon III, and daughter Olenna Targaryen, it shows on the first original genealogy one called Rhaenyra Targaryen. Some may spell it H-E-A-E-R-A, and others may spell it H-E-R-A, Targaryen. Then you look at another genealogy, and she's nowhere to be found. The question is, did she really exist? Was she a myth? Or was it because she, in defiance, decided that she had enough of the faith of 7 to talk to them as a ruthless and heretic-styled religious faction? Perhaps, in theory, though not proven, after she did go to the faith of the 7, and having learned of their traditions and everything, saw where they were just a little too harsh on people about certain things. She may have been, in theory, not one to support same-sex orientation or relations, but perhaps she disappeared to start what would be considered the fire and blood religious faction for those who are true lerns and true Targaryens. In either case, she is only known by a name and only appears on certain copies of the genealogical charts, not showing having any children or otherwise. Continuing on where we left off, the reign of the Broken King ended with Aegon the Younger's death at 36 years of age from consumption in 157 AC. Many of his subjects thought him far older for his boyhood and had been cut short, and the melancholy king is not remembered fondly. Legacy. Aegon III was succeeded by his 14-year-old son, Daeron. Aegon was said to have always walked with a great grief, and the folly of his sons nearly tore the realm apart. After both Daeron and Baelor died childless, Aegon's brother, Viserys II, was crowned king. Viserys was followed by his own son, Aegon IV Targaryen. Aegon's line did not discontinue altogether. Aegon's daughter, Dana the Defiant, had a bastard child with her cousin Prince Aegon. The bastard, eventually known as Daemon Blackfyre, became the first of the Blackfyre pretenders and contested his cousin Daeron II Targaryen, the legitimate son of Aegon IV Targaryen, for the Iron Throne. Daemon created his own house, House Blackfyre, and had 7 sons and at least 2 daughters. The Blackfyre line continued for quite some time until Maelys Blackfyre was slain during the War of the Nine Penny Kings in 260 AC. Princess Aelena Targaryen also continued Aegon's line. She was married 3 times and gave birth to 7 children. There's a lot of children for you. Wow. Her first 2 children were illegitimate, fathered by Lord Alan Valerian, John and Jane Waters. Descendants of John live until this day under the name Longwaters. Subsequently, she married Lord Ossifer Plum, by whom she had 1 child, Viserys Plum, though he is rumored to have actually been fathered by King Aegon IV, and Lord Ronald Penrose, by whom she had 4 children, Robin Penrose, Lena Penrose, Jocelyn Penrose, and Joy Penrose. Her 3rd and final marriage to Sir Michael Manley was childless. The small council under Aegon III, during the reign of King Aegon, was known by the members of Hand of the King, which was by Lord Creekenstark, Hand of the King, also Sir Tywin Lannister, Hand of the King by Lord Unwin Peake, Hand of the King by Lord Thaddeus Rowan, Hand of the King by Sir Marston Waters, Hand of the King by Grand Maester Lumpkin, Hand of the King by Lord Torhen Manderly, Hand of the King by Prince Viserys Targaryen, and Grand Maester Munkin. The Council of Regents consisted of, which is the Regency Council of Aegon III, as originally constituted, Lady Jane Arryn, Lady of the Eyrie, from 131 to 134 AC, Lord Royce Caron, Lord of the Marches, between 131 and 132 AC, Sir Torren Manderly, from 131 to 133 AC, Lord Manfred Luton, Lord of Maidenpool, from 131 to 134 AC, Grand Maester Munkin, from 131 to 136 AC, Lord Corlys Valerian, Master of Driftmark and Lord of the Tides, from 131 to 132 AC, Lord Roland Westerling, Lord of the Crag, from 131 to 133 AC. Subsequent replacements were Lord Unwin Peake, Lord of Starpike, replaced Lord Corlys in 132 to 134 AC. Lord Thaddeus Rowan, Lord of Golden Grove, replaced Lord Roland from 133 to 136 AC. Sir Corwin Corbray replaced Lord Manfred, 134 AC. And a special note there, Corwin Corbray happened to be one of the husbands of Rhaenyra Targaryen, one of 2 daughters of former Prince Daemon Targaryen, uncle and husband to former Queen Rhaenyra Targaryen from Dragonstone, who was the rightful queen heir to the Iron Throne of Swords for the realm of the kingdoms, as named by former King Viserys I Targaryen. Regents chosen by lot at the Great Council of 136 was William Stackspear, Mark Merriweather, Laurent Gradisson. Quotes by Aegon. I mean to give the small folk peace, and food, and justice. If that will not suffice to win their love, let Mushroom make a progress. Or perhaps we might send a dancing bear. Someone once told me that the commons love nothing half so much as dancing bears. You may call a halt to this feast tonight as well. Send the lords home to their own keeps, and give the food to the hungry. Full bellies and dancing bears shall be my policy. From the account of Grand Maester Munkin of the King's words to Lord Torrin Manderley when he ended the regency. Now, while Aegon III was sitting on the Iron Throne of Swords for the realm of kingdoms in King's Landing, the ruling king of Dragonstone and prince of Dragonstone from the House of Targaryen itself, again was the brother Viserys II. Viserys II Targaryen was the 10th king from House Targaryen to sit the Iron Throne as Lord of the Seven Kingdoms. He was the son of Rhaenyra Targaryen and Daemon Targaryen, the brother and hand of King Aegon III Targaryen, and the father of King Aegon IV Targaryen, Queen Daenerys Targaryen, and Prince Aemon the Dragon Knight. Appearance. According to a semi-canon source, Viserys II was clean-shaven with long hair. He had a prominent nose, bushy eyebrows, and a shrewd, calculating look to him. He wore the civil crown of Aegon III. Viserys was frailer than his brother Aegon, but was more mature than him and his other Valyrian half-brothers. Unlike Aegon, Viserys had the gift of charm, but later became stern. In the history of his youth, he was born in 122 AC. Viserys was the second-born son of his father, Prince Daemon Targaryen, and the fifth-born son of his mother, Princess Rhaenyra Targaryen. As per Targaryen tradition, a dragon egg was placed in his cradle. Viserys was named after his grandfather, King Viserys I Targaryen. Viserys had 4 older brothers, 3 half-brothers from his mother's first marriage, Jacaerys, Lucerys, and Joffrey Valerian, and 1 full-blood brother, Aegon. He also had 2 older half-sisters, Baela and Rhaena Targaryen, from his father's second marriage. Viserys lived with his mother, father, brothers, and sisters on Dragonstone, his mother's seat, as the Princess of Dragonstone. When his grandfather died in early 129 AC, Viserys and his family were thus away from the capital since Rhaenyra was pregnant for the 6th time. The pregnancy led to the birth of Viserys' stillborn younger sister, Visenya. The death of his grandfather sparked a war of succession between Viserys' mother, Rhaenyra, and his half-uncle, Prince Aegon, who was crowned King Aegon II Targaryen, despite Rhaenyra having been the heir to the throne. The Dance of the Dragons. In late 129 AC, at the behest of their half-brother Jacaerys Valerian, Viserys and his older brother Aegon were sent to Essos aboard the gay Abandon to be fostered by a prince of Pentos, until their mother Rhaenyra secured the Iron Throne. However, the fleet of the Kingdom of the Three Daughters, who were allied with the Greens and Aegon II Targaryen, captured the gay Abandon during the voyage. Aegon flew away atop his dragon Stormcloud, but Viserys had only a dragon egg. Remaining behind, the clever Viserys hid his egg and disguised himself as a common ship's boy, but his identity was revealed by one of the crew. A Tyroshi captain brought Viserys to Jericho Lohar, the Triarchy's admiral. Viserys' fate through the remainder of the Dance of the Dragons was unknown to his family, who believed he had died in the battle. Later, life. Viserys ended up in Lys under the stewardship of the wealthy Rogaire family, whose bank at the time was as powerful as the Iron Bank of Braavos. Viserys was wed at age 12 to the family's eldest daughter, Lara, in 134 AC, despite her being 7 years his senior. During the early reign of Viserys' older brother, Aegon III, it became known in Westeros that Viserys had survived. He was recovered by Oakenfist in 134 AC or 135 BC, and after a huge ransom was paid to the merchant princess of Lys, Viserys returned to King's Landing. Aegon had never forgiven himself for abandoning his brother during the Battle of the Gullet, and so Viserys' return was the only true joy he had in his reign. For the rest of Aegon's life, Viserys was the only person Aegon ever fully trusted. Viserys came to King's Landing with his new wife, Lara Rogaire, and several of her kin. The ambitious Rogaire family soon became embroiled in the conflicts of the regency of Aegon III. Although the Rogaires at the Red Keep were apparently guilty of some crimes, their rivals in King's Landing blamed them for many more. In 135 AC, Lord Thaddeus Rohan was tortured in an attempt to find evidence against the Rogaires, and Sir Marston Waters, the Hand of the King, sent men to capture Laura after arresting her brothers. Aegon and Viserys refused to surrender Laura, however, and the case against the Rogaires collapsed. Viserys and Laura had 3 children: Aegon, born 135 AC, Aemon, born 136 AC, and Daenerys, born 138 AC. Unfortunately, Laura never felt happy at court, and in 139 AC she left Viserys and their 3 children and returned to Lys, an experience that made Viserys stern. Viserys had Aegon and Daenerys wed to one another in 153 AC with Aegon III's blessing, while Aemon became a knight of the King's Guard. After Aegon III came of age in 136 AC, he dismissed the regents and his Hand of the King, and named Prince Viserys as his Hand. Viserys served as Hand during the remaining years of Aegon's reign and during the reigns of both Aegon's sons, Daeron I and Baelor I. He was instrumental in keeping the realm intact while Aegon brooded, Daeron warred, and Baelor prayed. It was rumored that to spare the realm embarrassment, Viserys used his position as Hand to order the poisoning of a stonemason whom Baelor had appointed as High Septon. Reign. Viserys II ascended to the throne at age 49 after the death of his nephew Rhaenyra I Targaryen in 171 AC. There were some amongst the small folk, and even some lords, who felt that the Iron Throne should have rightfully passed to Baelor's sister, Daena, as she was Aegon III's eldest daughter. However, a decade of isolation in the Maiden Vault had left Daena and her sisters without powerful allies, and memories of Rhaenyra Targaryen and the Dance of the Dragons have left many leery of the idea of a woman on the Iron Throne. Also, Daena the Defiant was seen by many as being wild, unmanageable, and wanton, as a year earlier she had given birth to her bastard son Daemon. The precedents of the Great Council of 101 AC and the Dance of the Dragons were therefore cited the claims of Baelor's sisters were set aside, and the crown passed to Viserys. Although his reign lasted only a little longer than a year, Viserys issued reforms of the royal household and its functions, established a new royal mint, made efforts to increase trade across the narrow sea, and made positive revisions to the already progressive code of laws established by the old king, Jaehaerys I. It is believed that Viserys had it in him to be another Jaehaerys the Wise, as he was just as wise and shrewd. Unfortunately, a sudden illness led to his death in 172 AC. Viserys was succeeded by his eldest son, Aegon IV Targaryen. Some historians suspect that Viserys' death was not natural and that Aegon IV had poisoned him. His legacy. Viserys is not remembered fondly in Westeros, as some accuse him of poisoning Baelor to gain the throne, and doing nothing once he gained it. Still, Viserys may have reigned for only a year, but in his previous role as Hand of the King, he had ruled and preserved the land for much longer. The reigns and follies of Aegon, Daenerys, and Baelor would have been much worse if it were not for his tenure as Hand of the King. So as you can see here, this is the genealogical charts for Viserys II. Okay, now, going back a bit, if you remember, the House of Rhaenyra. This is where he had been betrothed to Laura Rhaenyra. And here's the bit of information regarding that house. House Rhaenyra was a wealthy banking family from Lys of Valyrian descent and features. They were affiliated with the Rhaenyra Bank. It is unknown if descendants still live in the Free City. In history, the Rhaenyra family from the Free City of Lys was once closely tied to the Seven Kingdoms of Westeros. Lady Laura Rhaenyra was the wife of Prince Viserys Targaryen, and her uncle Drazenko was the consort of Alejandra Martell, Princess of Dorne. For some years after the Targaryen Civil War, known as the Dance of the Dragons, the Rhaenyra Bank rivaled the Iron Bank of Braavos in size, and the family became heavily involved in Westerosi court intrigues during the Lysaning Spring. Although the Rhaenyras at the Red Keep were apparently guilty of some crimes, their rivals in King's Landing blamed them for many more. Lord Thaddeus Rowan was tortured in an attempt to find evidence against the Rhaenyras, and Sir Marston Waters, the Hand of the King to Aegon III Targaryen, sent men to capture Laura after arresting her brothers. Aegon and Viserys refused to surrender Laura, however, and the case against the Rhaenyras collapsed. Laura left the court at King's Landing after she grew homesick and returned to Lys in 139 AC. Laura's father, Lysandro the Magnificent, proclaimed himself first Magister for life, but the Rhaenyras began to weaken when he and Drazenko died with a day of each other. Rival Magisters resented Lysandro's heir, the ambitious Lysaro Rhaenyra, who is scourged to death at the Temple of Trade. Lysaro's siblings were not executed, however, and Morito Rhaenyra, carrier of the Valyrian steel sword Truth, once led a campaign against Lys. Now, looking a little closer at Laura Rhaenyra, Lady Laura Rhaenyra was a member of House Rhaenyra of Lys, who became the wife of Prince Viserys Targaryen, brother of King Aegon III Targaryen. She abandoned Viserys before his ascendance to the Iron Throne, thus she never became queen consort. Laura was the mother of King Aegon IV Targaryen, Prince Aemon the Dragon Knight, and Queen Daenerys Targaryen. Her appearance and character. She was tall and willowy, with the silver gold hair and purple eyes of old Valyria. Laura was considered a great beauty. In history, Lady Laura was a noble woman born to the wealthy and influential House Rogaire, a banking family from the free city of Lys. She was the daughter of Lysandro Rogaire, known as Lysandro the Magnificent, and the Rogaire Bank even surpassed that of the Iron Bank of Braavos during its prime. Laura wed Prince Viserys Targaryen in 134 AC, when he was 12 and her 19. Not long thereafter, Lord Alan Valerian found Viserys in Lys and paid a vast sum of coin for the prince's release. Viserys was taken back to Westeros, and Laura went with him, accompanied by her brothers Lassaro and Morito. In King's Landing in 135 AC, she gave birth to the first of her 3 children with Viserys, Prince Aegon. There were many at court who mistrusted the ambitious Rogaire family, who soon became embroiled in the conflicts of the regency of Prince Viserys' brother, King Aegon III Targaryen. Laura's brothers were arrested, and Lord Thaddeus Rowan, the Hand of the King, was tortured for information, having been suspected to have been working together with the Rogaires. Sir Marston Waters of the King's Guard, the New Hand, ordered the arrest of Laura, but Aegon III and Viserys refused to give her up. They were besieged in Maegor's Holdfast for 18 days before Marston fulfilled his knight's command to arrest those who had implicated Lord Rowan and the Rogaires falsely. Marston was then killed trying to apprehend Sir Marvin Flowers, also of the King's Guard. In 136 AC, Laura gave birth to a second son, Prince Aemon. A daughter, Princess Daenerys, followed in 138 AC. Laura never felt part of the court at King's Landing, however, and was never truly happy in Westeros. A year after having given birth to Daenerys in 139 AC, Laura returned to Lys. She eventually died in 145 AC of unknown causes. Prince Viserys, an otherwise charming man, grew stern after Laura left him and their children. At the end of the post-war reign of the son of Queen Rhaenyra Targaryen of Dragonstone, who had the rightful claim to the Iron Throne of Swords for the realm of kingdoms, King Aegon III, William then sets back a bit and does some thinking. Any thoughts, William? Yes, he did seem to have a sad life. Um, it had to have been very traumatic for him to see his mother be um, murdered the way she was by one who wasn't even worthy enough to be a judge, King Aegon II. And so it affected his marriage to where, fortunately, the Targaryen line did continue, even if he was very sensitive, but too sensitive to even sleep with his own wife and have heirs to the throne. Even though, from what I understand, it didn't sound like they were very much promising either. No, but when we will be covering this soon. Um, they didn't exactly lead um, or have the throne for long, as we'll recap after their time. The short time that Viserys II had the throne. So, I suppose then there's going to be more following King Viserys II. Yes, there will be the rest of the children, and there will be another rebellion, as I said, not as big as the civil war known as Dance of the Dragons, within the House of Targaryen. They were called Blackfyre, but we'll learn about this soon. For right now, I think we should take a break, and when we return, we will start with the children, and especially two of Aegon III, just before Viserys II followed as heir to the Throne of Swords, even if it was just for about a year. Alright, well, I need to stretch anyway. So with that, they get up, walk past the library that has the Targaryen flag outside, and go outside for some fresh air at the palace terrace.